Welcome back, everybody, to Toronto Today here on the Parlay. I'm your host, Luca Rosano, alongside my co-host, Michael Singh. And we are back on this fine Monday to talk shop. There was a lot of sports that went down on the weekend, most notably the NFL playoffs. I mean, it was an incredible showcase. Probably the best weekend of football I have ever seen in my life. I mean, Saturday through Sunday, we got 3 games that were decided on a last-second field goal, and then an overtime classic between the Bills and the Chiefs. So I was excited to see what I saw, and I was more excited to know that my best bet cashed in. I did take the Bengals plus 3.5, and they won the game outright. So I'm now 6-5 with my best bet. Mike, before we get to your best bet record, did you get to watch some of the football?
Yeah, man, it was a crazy week. And as I've told you in the past, I'm honestly not the biggest football guy. But this weekend, I was absolutely glued to my television screen because the games were so close. I told you before, I hope the games are closer than the last round, and they more than delivered. Every game was sort of had you at the edge of your seat. And I was watching that the Buccaneers game and the LA Rams, and I'm thinking to myself, like, yeah, okay, this comeback hypothetically happens, and behold, you know, they came back, and then the Rams had that crazy couple of plays which led to the game-winning field goal. And I'm thinking to myself at that time, like, all right, there's no way that this Bills KC game can kind of top what we just witnessed. And then that game plays out, and I'm like, holy cow, what a matchup. I'm sad for Buffalo, because if I had to pick a team aside from the Colts, who I've been kind of a long time fan of, I would say Buffalo is kind of that secondary team, and because they're so close to Toronto here, and they, you know, in the past they've played a game here, and I was kind of hoping for the Bills to kind of push through this time, but Patrick Mahomes, man, just too good. But Luca, I know if I dish it back to you on the NFL, you can honestly go for the entire show, because I'm sure you have a bunch of thoughts on the NFL.
Yeah, we won't do that because I do have a lot to get to. All I'm going to say is this: 13 seconds, Bills, 13 seconds between you and an AFC Championship game and possibly the Super Bowl, because I honestly think the Chiefs are probably going to beat the Bengals now. I had the winner of the Bills and Chiefs getting on through to the Super Bowl. So yeah, it sucks. I'm not a Bills fan. I'm a Ravens fan. But like you mentioned, Mike, they're so close to Toronto. You wanted to see them pull that off. You wanted to see them win. Bills Mafia, they deserve it. And 13 seconds away, they just couldn't get one stop. And they start back at their 4th AFC Championship game in a row. Crazy.
Unlucky number 13 it is, I guess. That's too much time to give Patrick Mahomes. That's crazy. That's crazy, man. Yeah,
really, really crazy stuff. All right, let's begin this show with some tennis talk. What's crazy is that Shapo is on to the next round along with Felix. Let's first talk about Shapo. He won his last matchup. It was a straight set victory, and now he's going to take on Rafael Nadal. So talk about a big-time showdown in the quarters. You look at Shapo's odds for this one, Mike. I know you've been riding him with these couple of victories that he's gotten, and he's won you some money. He's a plus 220 dog against Nadal, and now he's plus 1,800 to win the whole thing. So before we get to Felix's matchup, let's just talk about this one. What's your instant reaction to Shapo making it to this part of the tournament, and do you give him a chance against Nadal? I mean, he could very well pull this one off with the way he's been playing.
He could very well pull this one off, and just first, my initial reaction on that match on Saturday night, man, special. I think that was probably one of the greatest Canadian victories that we've seen, especially from the men's side, at least in recent years, right? Like, Zverev was coming in, and he was, like, as I mentioned last show, plus 240 to kind of win the entire tournament. Yeah. And Shapo made him look like he was the underdog there. Shapo dominated that match. As you mentioned, there, a straight set victory that he honestly looked comfortable during the entire match. That final set, he just breezed through, and you know, I'm happy it didn't go on too long, because I actually managed to stay up and watch that full match, which was something I haven't really been able to say too often here at the Australian Open. And I love it. Now, as you mentioned, he's going to go face Rafael Nadal next, which is just a terrible draw. It's so unlucky that he, you know, takes out Zverev, and then he has to face Nadal, who honestly is playing some really good tennis, some of the best tennis we've seen from Nadal in a long time. But he's not the same Rafael Nadal as he was in the past. And this isn't Rafael Nadal on clay court at the French Open at Roland Garros. This is him at the Australian Open. Now, it won't be easy as he's obviously the favorite in that one, Nadal, as Shapo is plus 220 just straight up to win that match. But he's 3-3 lifetime against Nadal. So it's not like he hasn't done it before. They've played quite a bit since 2017 and he's done it. So I wouldn't rule Shapo out. I'm feeling less confident in this one than I was against Zverev for whatever reason, even though the odds are better.
Man, why not get some fresh new blood in a semis? We're so accustomed to seeing the same guys in tennis, the names, Nadal, Federer, the list goes on and on. But yeah, why not, make way to a new era in tennis and welcome it with the Canadian talent on the men's side. So I feel pretty good about this one. I think this could be a mini changing of the guard of just this young, fresh-faced Canadian talent superseding a name that has been around for so long now in the tennis world, and that is Rafael Nadal. So, I mean, if you are feeling lucky, yeah, I would probably sprinkle some money on those odds because I think every great player has, the end of the tunnel in your sight. And we look at a guy like Federer, we don't know if he's ever going to be the same. Obviously, riddled with injuries. It's sad to see because he is my favorite tennis player of all time. But all these greats, they have their time that, comes to an end. And, I don't want to relate it back to football, but I will. Look at a guy like Rodgers and Brady. We don't know if we're going to see them again. And we kind of saw the new era on full display in the NFL. So maybe this theme follows suit in the tennis world. We'll see. And then let's talk about the other Canadian, Felix. He won his 4th round matchup in 4 sets. But now he's going to take on Medvedev, who has been on a tear lately. And similar to Shapo, unfortunate draw here, but here's the thing. If you're going to want to win the tournament, you're going to have to take on these big names eventually. They're going to be there. So my question is this with Felix. He's been playing well. If he takes down Medvedev, do you like his chances to get to a final and even win this thing?
Absolutely, I do. But it's a big if. If he takes down Daniel Medvedev, who was the favorite in this tournament, still is the favorite to win this tournament, is probably right now, aside from Djokovic, probably the best tennis player in the world. And that's saying something. Am I confident about Felix's chances? Not at all. But there is a chance. Funnier things can happen. This is Felix's first time making the quarterfinals at the Australian Open, and he's riding some momentum. Like that win against Opelka was impressive, and this most recent win against Cilic was probably even more impressive, especially when you consider that the match didn't start very well for Felix, and he made adjustments. He slowed the game down, and he managed to persevere and break through here. So I think he's really confident heading into this match. Unfortunately, the numbers are not on Felix's side. He heads into this one as a plus 450 underdog, and that's because he's 0-3 lifetime against Daniel Medvedev. And actually, in 8 sets total, Felix has only taken 1 set from that Russian. So wow. It's gonna be really tough if he does break. It'll be the first time that he does do it. But Felix, like I said, is playing some really good tennis. He's riding a high, so I wouldn't rule him out. I just think at this point, I know I said last episode, I think Felix has the better chance. But I think between these 2 matches, I think Shapo has a better chance. And it's kind of cool seeing Canadians on the opposite side of the draw.
Yeah.
Because who knows what could happen if both of these guys get through. Like, what are the chances of an all Canadian final at the Australian Open? But a lot of work still to do to get there. And typically on this rundown, I put the tennis kind of at the bottom here. But I feel like this was just such a monumental story with both these guys cracking through the quarters that we had to talk about it early.
No, I love it, especially if both these guys can some way, somehow get through. I mean, yeah, if we do have that all Canadian final, we got to live stream this final. I mean, the game's probably going to be at 3 a.m. or whatever it's going to be, but we got to find a way to live stream and just get a reaction to it because that would be something. But I agree with you. I think the player who's most likely out of the 2 is definitely Shapo. Because yeah, Medvedev has just been on a whole other level, and I agree with that point you just said about, next to Joker, he is the best tennis player in the world right now. I think he is. And that's been the one guy who has gone head to head with the Joker and kind of giving him a little bit of run for his money. So yeah, it's going to be extremely tough for Felix, but hey, we're going to be rooting for both, and let's see if we'll have more Canadian tennis to talk about on this show. But we're actually going to switch gears now, talk about the Maple Leafs. They were victorious, and they did cover against the Islanders. It was a very nice outing. They got goals from Marner, Reilly, and Engvall, and they will be playing the Ducks now on Wednesday. And this was a really good start for Petr Mrazek, as I believe this was his 5th game played only this season, and he really did a good job of holding his own between the pipes. So what was your reaction to this Leafs win against the Islanders? We didn't have any shaky theme that we had in the past, no collapse, no choke job here. And you had a good story coming out of it of Petr Mrazek, a guy who has looked shaky in the past, maybe cementing himself as a guy who the Leafs can count on going forward here.
Yeah, perhaps that is the main storyline that comes of it. And it was it was a good win. I didn't come away feeling too convinced, although the UBS Arena, I mean, especially when Tavares and the Leafs come there, that's a hostile environment. So I have to give credit to the Leafs to kind of persevere through that and prevail and pick up that win. I wasn't too convinced by it. I thought they didn't look as good as they've looked in the past. But sometimes, you got to pick up these 2 points on not your best nights, and that's what's going to make the difference in the season. The pressure's on right now for the Maple Leafs. Boston is right on their tail. They're 3 points back of the Leafs right now for that 3rd spot there in the Atlantic Division. And right now, Boston's in that final wildcard spot. So the Leafs could find themselves in that boat if Boston keeps rolling like they've been rolling and the Leafs kind of continue to put out sort of unconvincing performances. So I know there was a lot of positives. Another positive was Morgan Reilly, who had a beautiful goal, great dish by William Nylander. Reilly has 33 points in 38 games this season, which puts him actually on his pace for his second 70-plus point season, which is great because he just signed that new deal, and since he signed that deal, he's honestly been rolling. Like right now, he sits 7th in the league in scoring from the blue line, ahead of guys like John Carlson and Quinn Hughes, which is exactly that type of category you kind of want Reilly in when he's going to be paid so much. So good to see Reilly, get that. Kerfoot had a good night. Marner as well with that shorthanded goal. And of course, as I mentioned, William Nylander, a couple of good performances, but I think the best one, as you kind of touched off the bat, was Petr Mrazek there, Luca. Yeah. Mrazek finally picking up his win as a Maple Leaf. 27 saves, only 1 goal against. This was easily his best start as a Leaf. So kind of throwing it back at you here, Luca. The Leafs have 45 games remaining. How many more starts do you think Petr Mrazek makes this year? And I'll set the over-under for you. I'll say 45 games left. Let's say the over-under is 14. Do you go over 14 or under 14?
Oh, I'm going to go with under 14 because at this point he's only made 5 starts. So that's an easy one for me. I was actually looking at the schedule to see, back-to-backs being played. But yeah, I just realized, I like the Raptors, not too many back-to-backs this season. So yeah, as much as he showed us a lot in that win, and I'm so happy for the guy, he finally does get a victory under his belt, I would probably go under that. Just to throw a number at you, I'd probably see him maybe getting closer to 10, but to get over 14, I just don't see it. Just kind of looking at the trajectory of the season and kind of, what he's been given so far. I know this is going to do a whole lot of good for his confidence and the team's confidence to put faith in him to start some of these games, but I just don't see him getting that over. If the Leafs go on an absolute tear and we're towards the end of the season and they're just playing the resting game where games don't mean much, I can see them getting a whole bunch of starts. But if they are competing to get that 1 seed and trying to get the best record and home ice throughout, I think those more important starts are going to go to Anderson. So yeah, I just don't see Mrazek.
Jack Campbell, you mean?
Sorry, Jack Campbell. I'm still thinking of a couple seasons ago. I don't see him going over 14, especially with how Campbell's just been lighting it up. We're talking about him on just a whole new level right now.
Yeah, that's fair. That's more than fair. I was going to set the over-under at 10, but I felt like that was just slightly too easy. But, I mean, I feel like that would have made it tougher for you. Leafs, as you mentioned, their Leafs have 4 back-to-backs remaining right now left in the season. So that's probably 4 starts you can chalk up to Mrazek. And then, you know, from there, 41 games left. Can he make 10 starts from 41 games? I might be leaning towards around that number. Just because... Well, Jack Campbell's never played this many games in his career yet. Of late, he started to kind of fade, even though I wouldn't like solely blame Jack Campbell. And you wanted a rested, healthy Jack Campbell heading into the postseason. Yeah. And Mrazek was kind of signed as that guy who can be this 1A, 1B kind of tandem. So now that he's finally healthy, he looks... Of late, most recently against the Islanders, he looks like he can still hang and still be a decent goaltender in the NHL. Perhaps the Leafs decide to take some pressure. Sheldon Keefe decides to take some pressure off Campbell down the stretch and give Mrazek a couple more starts. We'll see. I think he's definitely earned his next one. And from there, I guess it'll tell whether or not Keefe has full confidence in him or not.
I'll throw a quick one at you, just given, you know, Jack Campbell's aura and how good he can be for this team. Let's talk postseason. I know we don't want to go that ahead, but I will. Over under 1 start for Petr Mrazek in the postseason, or do you think it would just be all Campbell?
Under. Yeah, under. For sure. Unless there's barring an injury, I'd say under, because Campbell's their guy. He's proven it. And in the playoffs, as we've touched on in the past, you don't go with that tandem. So definitely under for me. Yeah,
you're going to have the night off, sometimes 2 nights off in between games. So I agree with that. Okay, let's go from one positive to a negative, and that is the Toronto Raptors, who they just got me shaking my head, man. They get a nice win against the Wizards, in which the Wizards did lead big in the first half, but they came back thanks to Scotty Barnes. He had a career high with 27. By the way, kudos to you for that player prop. That cashed in beautifully. You said over. I think it was 12 and a half. That hit and then some. But then on Sunday, at home, again with no fans, against a Blazers team that I think they're tanking. I don't see this team doing much of anything this season. Dane's probably going to be out for the majority of the season. And this is just going to be a year where they see what they got, and maybe they do become sellers at the deadline and blow this thing up. The Raptors, 8.5-point favorites, should have an easy time in this game. And you're looking at the score as you're watching the football game, and you're like, how are the Raptors down? At one point, it was 40 plus points. I was like, are you kidding me? And then the Raptors do what they typically do. They come on back, and their comeback falls short. It's like the Raptors forget there are 4 quarters in a basketball game. And if only they could play all 4 quarters, their record would be a lot better this season, Mike, because this was another fake comeback. And this just has me feeling like you built so much good momentum. You're playing tough. You're playing competitively against some of the upper echelon teams in the NBA. And then you drop a game like this that you have no business in dropping. This reminded me of the game against the Pistons. Heavy favorites. They lose a game in which they had no business in losing. And here I am as a fan just second guessing things, because last week I'm thinking, okay, this team could possibly be a sleeper team in the East because everybody's back. They're getting it going. Gary Trent Jr. returned to the lineup on Friday. But then you lose a game like this, and it's like, okay, who are these Raptors? Are they for real? Can they be a contender as a sleeper team, or are they pretenders? And I know we got that written on the rundown here. I don't know. I really don't know. This team's got me so indifferent right now, where they could look like a legitimate contender that could be a good opponent against a Brooklyn team or a Bucks team in a first-round playoff matchup. But then the other side of it, they look like a team that they're barely going to make the playoffs if they continue this very inconsistent 500 type of play.
Yeah, for those listening, I've been nodding my head because the entire time, because Luca's just bang on there. I wrote contenders or pretenders into the rundown because I don't know. I don't have an answer at this point. I think that's the $1 million question, as we've touched on in the past, about this Raptors team. Are they going to be buyers or are they going to be sellers? And if you look at the Friday match, you're convinced, like, why not go out and add a piece or two to this team to kind of make them better? But then Sunday rolls around and they have the worst half they've had in the season, their entire season. It was terrible. And, you know, credit to Portland, like Anthony Simons is an absolute baller. I've watched him like kind of all season, and I was thinking he could be the next Dame and CJ, and he's really emerged without Damian Lillard in the lineup, and he torched the Raptors on Sunday. You know, a couple key shots at the end as well, and he's really good for prop bets, by the way, if you guys want to take a look at him. Good for threes and good for points if you guys are looking at prop bets. But if we kind of like remove that first half, let's just say it was an anomaly. The second half, I mean, it spoke volumes about this team's leadership and kind of identity, that they wouldn't give in despite trailing by 34 points at various points throughout the game. Pascal Siakam, I got to give him some love in that second half. He balled out. 26 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists in the second half. He was really the lone positive for that Raptors team throughout the night. I know Freddie kind of came alive late, but he also had an off night shooting. OG had an off night shooting. Scotty Barnes had an off night shooting. Gary Trent still needs to get some shots under his belt to kind of get back into the rhythm that he was in. But this next stretch of games sort of, I think, will give us the answer for the Raptors, because they're facing Charlotte twice, Chicago twice, Miami twice, and Atlanta twice over their next 8 games. So those are all teams, maybe subtract Atlanta from that mix, but all teams that they're legitimate teams in the Eastern Conference. Fortunate the Raptors might go up against Chicago without Lonzo Ball and potentially Zach LaVine, although he is kind of nearing a return. But I think these next stretch of games will determine kind of what the Raptors are. It's so important for them to really decipher whether or not they are going to be buyers or sellers. If they come out, they have 8 strong games, then I think you have to lean buying. But if not, then perhaps Gary Trent Jr. is on the market or Chris Boucher is on the market. We'll see how this plays out.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think this next 2 weeks are going to be very critical to what the Raptors do here. It just leaves me shaking my head, because this has been a season-long theme for this team where they seem motivated in stretches throughout a game, but they can never fully put a 48-minute performance. I don't know if it's because they underestimate their opponent or they just get complacent. But yeah, this team, they just don't seem like they're locked in throughout the duration of a game. I mean, sometimes they are, and we see how good they can be. But then you see these performances against teams like the Blazers that you should easily beat, and it just leaves you second guessing and questioning a lot of things. I will say this about buyers or sellers. Yeah, if the Raptors come out of the stretch looking really good, I think they will look to do something. And according to Josh Lewenberg, they will be scoping the market and trying to act as buyers. Now, the problem is, how are you going to act as a buyer when you want to keep guys like Boucher and Gary Trent Jr.? Because if the Raptors are going for it, I don't see them trading any of those 2 guys. Boucher's been your best bench piece. The only guy who makes sense via trade, if the Raptors are going to get aggressive and try to bring something in return that would help a playoff push, is trying to move that contract of Goran Dragic. And that's what I think is going to come down to. If a team is willing to bite and brings in Dragic, who still does have value. I mean, he's a veteran guard. He's been a winner. He knows how to get it done. He's playing some pretty big playoff games, NBA Finals games with the Miami Heat. That's the one guy I look at here at the Raptors possibly shipping. And a team that instantly comes to mind is the Dallas Mavericks, because that's a team to me that will be looking to make a move. And there's a huge correlation there between Dragic and Doncic. They're great friends. They played with each other on the national team. So that's the one player that I look at here. Masai just doing everything he can to move a guy like Dragic and bring something in return that would help this team. And I think the number one necessity on this team is a scoring wing who could come off the bench and just inject some life, some offense into this Raptors team when they go through their dry spells, when they do go through those tough stretches in a game, when you can have this guy along with the Chris Boucher inject some life into the second unit and into this team. So that's what I would love to see in a perfect world. But again, will teams be willing to take on Goran Dragic given his age and, more importantly, given his ludicrous contract right now? So well, yeah, it's going to be a very interesting couple weeks, Mike. I think this team is right there. They're not a lottery team per se, but are they more of a play-in team or playoff team? That's what we're going to find out very soon, I think.
For sure. And I think the one thing about Dragic is, I heard Michael Grange speak about this, is I'm not sure the reason he's playing is because it's the or he's not playing is because it's the Toronto Raptors. Apparently he's kind of, I don't know, dealing with a lot of personal things that has removed him from basketball. So whether that is Toronto or another team, I think that's the only reason why I'm hesitant to kind of put Dragic's name out there, because I don't know if he's actually going to be available. But if he is, yeah, Luca, you're bang on. Like that's a great fit right there in Dallas. They need a scoring wing. They also need a big. I think they also need a big man kind of in the post to kind of supplement Boucher, Achua, and Khem Birch, because they're really undersized there. Raptors overall, they're a bigger team, but they don't have that one guy that can handle a dominant center. You think of, Miami with Bam Adebayo and sort of some of the other teams they have to go up against, like Embiid, like who's going to be guarding Joel Embiid kind of come down the stretch. They don't have that guy anymore. So that's the one thing I'm also hesitant about. But yeah, we'll see if they're a playoff team or a play-in team. Because right now I think we can comfortably say they're definitely a play-in team.
Yeah.
But that's not good enough if you're competing. Like that's not good enough to be buyers. So
yeah, and that's where I don't like the play-in. I know it's cool, it gives teams a chance, but it's kind of like a false representation of that team. Are they good enough, or should they just be in the lottery? Because in years past, right, if you didn't get in one of those 8 top spots, you would be a lottery team and you would get a high draft pick. But now, when you're a borderline team like the Raptors are, of you don't really know where you're at, it gives you that false hope. Like, oh, worst case, we would be in the play-in and then we can make the playoffs. So is that beneficial? Some would argue no, but yeah, I think the Raptors definitely need a scoring wing. The thing about the center, that's very important, but I think they could compensate for now for the rest of the season potentially, because you got to think too, Khem Birch has missed a lot of time. Assuming he comes back and he's healthy, that's going to be a big boost for them. Achua's been playing solid lately, and Siakam has been playing more of a big, and we've seen that with his rebounding production, his production in the post. So his style has resembled a lot more of a traditional big in this last stretch of games as he's had. So I think that would compensate, but the bench just dreadful, last in almost every single category. They need some production from their bench, or else this team is not going to be a playoff team. And even if they do sneak in, they're going to be an easy opponent for whoever they play. Because if you're having to play, 5-6 guys that only produce, that's going to be an easy victory, especially if you're going up against a Brooklyn team or a Milwaukee team. But yeah, we'll see Masai. We'll see if he has any tricks up his sleeve. But we are going to now switch gears to our best bet of the night. I'm 6-5. Michael is 5-6. So hey, you're catching on up, man. You're only a game removed from hitting 500. I'll let you go first here. What is your best bet of the night?
I guess first I got to give some credit to the Canadian guys that have helped me out along this journey. The tennis guys who've really paid dividends for me. And unfortunately, I'm going to be drifting away from tennis. We'll see if this pays off or not. But I'm going back to the NBA, and one of the games that I loved was the Bulls against OKC. And the Bulls coming into that game as 2-point underdogs against OKC, 2-point favorites against OKC. And I believe they're going to cover that spread. DeMar DeRozan, they're coming off it's a second night of a back-to-back. DeMar DeRozan coming off a 40-point performance. And I know they're missing guys like Alex Caruso and Lonzo Ball, potentially even Zach LaVine again, although he is questionable for this game. But the OKC Thunder are just terrible. They're 1-9 in their last 10 games. Sometimes we can't even categorize them as a basketball team, and at a margin of just 2 points, I think the Bulls are going to find a way to persevere, and on the back of probably DeMar DeRozan and Vucevic here. So I'm taking the Bulls to cover that 2-point spread.
Yeah, it seems like such a tempting bet, right? Like there's such a little spread to cover going up against one of the worst teams in the league, but you gotta factor in the second night of a back-to-back, and will all those guys being out catch up with the Bulls? But this is a game that if DeRozan and Vooch both have good games, that should be enough to win. I mean, hell, if DeRozan goes off for 30 plus, that should be enough to win this game. So I do like that bet, but for whatever reason, I just decided to stay away, and instead I'm going with this. For the second time ever on the show, I'm actually going to go with an over-under bet, and I'm going to go under 222 Jazz Suns. The reason being the under has cashed in 4 of the Jazz's last 5, as well as 4 of Phoenix's last 5. So both these teams have been playing in fairly low scoring games. And you look at the Jazz, they're holding their opponents to an average of 107.4 points per game on about 44.8 shooting, which is 12th and 11th respectively in the NBA. So I think this is going to be a relatively close game, but I think at the very least it's going to be a low scoring game. The line I think for this one is 7. I was tempted to take the Jazz +7, but I do think the Suns could break away late and put this one away. I mean, it's not hard in the NBA with runs that you see left, right, and center of a team being down 1, and then all of a sudden they're up by 10. So I'm going to play a little bit safer here. I think this is a low scoring game. The Suns win, but the under cashes in at 222.
I like that a lot, just because the Jazz are coming off a pretty grueling, thrilling match against the Golden State Warriors, where they had a chance at the buzzer to win that match, but unfortunately did not. So the second night of a back-to-back for the Jazz. Of course, they're also potentially going to be missing Donovan Mitchell, who's been out for a little bit, and Mike Conley as well usually sits the second night of back-to-backs. So he played last night. Will he play again tonight? I'm not too sure. But there's not a lot of scoring punch on that team if you take away Donovan Mitchell. Like, Rudy Gobert is a very good player, but he's not a high volume scorer. Bogdanovich, another really good player, but again, like, not the craziest scorer in the NBA. So I like that a lot, especially coming from a second night of a back-to-back there, Luca.
Yeah, that's why I wasn't confident taking the points. So instead, I'm going to go with the under and just hoping if the Suns do win big, it's in a low-scoring one. And we'll see how our best bets do. We're trying to improve here with our record. I'm trying to get to 7-5. And Mike, like I mentioned, trying to get back to 500 at 6-6. But that will conclude Toronto today here on the Parlay. I'm Luca, along with my co-host Michael, bringing you the goods every single day, Monday through Friday. We talk Toronto sports and more. You can catch this podcast wherever you get your podcast. Follow us all over social media at the Parlay, and we will catch you all again tomorrow with another edition of Toronto Today. Thanks for watching, everybody, and have a great rest of the day.